think I didn't do anything wrong, just chose happiness when my husband couldn't give it to me anymore. But the way he looked at me holding that envelope, like I was the villain, still makes me wonder if everyone else sees it that way. I never expected the police to show up right after my lover told him to leave. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The silence in our townhouse living room felt heavier than usual that Tuesday evening. Nate sat on the couch, laptop balanced on his knees, fingers clicking away at some IT project, while our 7-year-old daughter Lila colored at the coffee table. The domestic scene should have felt peaceful, but all I could think about was how suffocating it had become. You know, some husbands actually talk to their wives when they come home, I said, setting down my wine glass harder than necessary on the kitchen counter. Nate looked up from his screen, those tired brown eyes meeting mine. I said hello when you walked in, Zuleika. I asked about your day. For 30 seconds before you buried yourself in work again. I crossed my arms, feeling the familiar surge of frustration. When's the last time we actually had a conversation? About anything other than bills or Lila's schedule? I'm trying to finish this project so I can spend the weekend with you and Lila without distractions. His voice stayed level, controlled. It always did, which somehow made me angrier. Mummy, why are you using your mad voice? Lila's crayon stopped moving across her coloring book. I'm not mad, sweetheart. Mummy's just tired. I forced a smile, but my eyes stayed locked on Nate. Tired of feeling invisible in my own home. Nate closed the laptop with a soft click. What do you want me to do, Zuleika? I work 40 hours a week, help with housework, spend time with Lila every evening. What exactly am I not giving you? The question hung in the air, and I realized I couldn't answer it without revealing the real problem. That Julian made me feel alive in ways Nate hadn't in years. That when Julian looked at me, I saw desire instead of obligation. That I'd been texting another man for 3 months and meeting him for coffee, then drinks, then more. Attention, Nate. Real attention. When's the last time you looked at me like you actually wanted me here? My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Julian. Thinking about you. Can't wait for tomorrow. I glanced at the message, feeling that familiar flutter in my stomach. Nate was watching me, and I saw something shift in his expression. Who's texting you this late? He asked quietly. Just work stuff. The lie came easily now. Property management doesn't stop at 5 o'clock. On a Tuesday night at 8:30, I picked up my phone, angling it away from him. Some of us have demanding jobs that require actual communication with people. The dig was petty, but I wanted him to react, to show some emotion. Instead, he just nodded slowly and reopened his laptop. You're right. I'll try to be more present. His quiet acceptance made me want to scream. Where was the passion? The fight? Julian would have argued back, would have grabbed me and kissed me, until I forgot why I was angry. Later that night, after Lila was asleep, I called my mother Carmen from the kitchen while Nate showered. He's just so passive, Mom. Like he doesn't care enough to fight for us. Honey, maybe he's not the right man for this phase of your life, Carmen said, her voice warm with understanding. You're 33, not dead. You deserve to feel desired. But Lila will be fine. Children are resilient. What they can't handle is growing up watching their mother slowly die inside. Her words felt like permission. When I hung up, I found Nate in our bedroom, already under the covers with a book. I'm going out with Sarah and the girls tomorrow night, I announced, though I had no plans to see my friends. Okay, I'll handle Lila's bedtime routine. That was it. No questions about where or when or who. Just quiet acceptance that felt more like indifference. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror as I brushed my teeth, seeing a woman who'd been fading away in a marriage that felt more like a business partnership. Tomorrow, I'd meet Julian at his apartment. Tomorrow, I'd remember what it felt like to be wanted. My phone buzzed again. Julian. Sweet dreams. Beautiful. I smiled, typing back quickly before Nate could see. Can't wait to see you. From the bedroom, I heard Lila's voice calling out from her room. Daddy? Is Mummy going away? Nate's footsteps moved toward her room. No, sweetheart. Mummy's just going to see her friends. She'll be home later. But as I stared at myself in the mirror, I wondered if that was really true anymore. Julian's apartment was everything our townhouse wasn't. Small, cluttered, alive with possibility. The walls were covered with concert posters and photographs from his bartending gigs, and everything smelled like his cologne, and the faint trace of cigarettes he thought he'd hidden from me. You look incredible, he murmured against my neck as I stepped inside, his hands already finding the curve of my waist. This was what I'd been missing. The hunger, the immediate desire, the way he made me feel like the most important thing in his world. With Nate, intimacy had become scheduled, predictable, another item on our endless list of marital obligations. I can't stay long, I whispered, even as I melted into Julian's arms. I told Nate I was working late on the Morrison property contracts. You tell him that a lot lately. Julian's voice held a note of amusement as he led me toward his bedroom. He doesn't question it. That's the kind of husband he is, trusting to a fault. Or maybe he just doesn't care enough to ask. The comment stung because part of me wondered if it was true. Would a man who truly loved his wife notice how often she worked late? How many new clothes she'd bought? How she'd started wearing perfume to the office? 2 hours later, I sat in Julian's kitchen wearing his oversized t-shirt, watching him make coffee with the kind of attention Nate used to give me. What are you thinking about? Julian asked, noting my distant expression. Just wondering how long I can keep doing this. You mean sneaking around? I nodded, accepting the mug he offered. Sometimes I think it would be easier if Nate would just, I don't know, give me a reason to leave. Like what? Fight with me, cheat on me, something dramatic that would make me the victim instead of... I gestured vaguely at myself. Instead of a woman taking control of her own happiness. Julian sat across from me, his green eyes serious. Zuleika, you don't need permission to want more from your life. That's what I loved about him. Julian saw my desires as valid, not selfish. He made me feel justified in pursuing what made me happy. My phone rang, Nate's ringtone. Hi, honey, I answered, my voice automatically shifting to the tone I used for my husband. Hey, just wanted to make sure you were okay. It's almost 10. I'm fine. These contracts are more complicated than I thought. I'll probably be here another hour. Do you want me to pick you up? It's pretty late to be driving alone. The offer was thoughtful, caring, exactly the kind of thing that made me feel guilty. No, I'm fine. My car's in the secure garage. Okay, Lila's asking for you. Want to say goodnight? Before I could answer, I heard my daughter's sleepy voice. Mommy, when are you coming home? Soon, baby. Mommy's working so we can have nice things. I don't need nice things. I just want you to read me a story. The guilt hit like a physical blow. Julian watched my face change, reaching across to squeeze my hand. Tomorrow night, I promise. Let Daddy read you the princess book tonight. After I hung up, Julian pulled me close. You're a good mother, Zuleika. Don't let guilt make you forget that you're also a woman with needs. But driving home 20 minutes later, Lila's words echoed in my head. I don't need nice things. I just want you to read me a story. The house was dark when I pulled into our driveway. Nate had left the porch light on and locked the front door. Small gestures of care that somehow made everything worse. If he'd been angry or suspicious, I could have justified my behavior. Instead, he made it easy for me to lie to him. I found him asleep in our bed, laptop closed on the nightstand, book open on his chest. He looked younger when he slept, more like the man I'd married 8 years ago, before mortgages and career pressures and the slow erosion of romance had worn us down. I slipped into the bathroom to shower off Julian's scent, staring at myself in the mirror again. My reflection looked flushed, alive, guilty. The next morning, Nate was making pancakes when I came downstairs. Lila sat at the kitchen table, still in her pajamas, chattering about a school project. "Coffee's fresh," Nate said, not looking up from the stove. "Thanks." I poured myself a cup, noting how he'd already added cream the way I liked it. "Mommy, you smell different," Lila announced, wrinkling her nose. My heart stopped. "Different how?" "Like flowers, but not your regular flowers." "I tried a new perfume sample at work," I said quickly, avoiding Nate's eyes. But when I glanced at him, he was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. For the first time in months, my husband looked like he was really seeing me. That afternoon, flowers arrived at my office. 24 red roses with a card that simply read, "For making me remember what happiness feels like. Jay." I was admiring them when my assistant knocked on my door. "Mrs. Farrow, your husband's here to see you." Nate stood in my doorway, holding a folder of documents, his eyes immediately finding the roses on my desk. "Beautiful flowers," he said quietly. "Special occasion?" "A client sent them. The Hendersons closed on their dream house yesterday." Another lie, but what choice did I have? Nate stepped closer, reading the card before I could hide it. "J for Henderson?" "James Henderson, yes." He nodded slowly, but something in his expression had shifted. "I brought those insurance papers you needed to sign." We handled the paperwork in silence, but I felt his attention like a weight. When he left, he kissed my cheek, something he hadn't done in months. "See you at home, Zuleika. Try not to work too late tonight." After he was gone, I stared at the roses, wondering if they'd been worth the risk. But when Julian texted me an hour later asking about dinner tomorrow, I found myself typing yes before I could think better of it. The lies were getting easier. That should have worried me more than it did. The cafe on Maple Street was our usual spot for girls' night. Sarah, Michelle, and I had been meeting there monthly for 3 years. But lately, these gatherings had become less about friendship and more about me testing how much I could say about my marriage without crossing obvious lines. "Nate seems distant lately," I said, stirring sugar into my latte. "Like he's physically present but mentally somewhere else." "All men go through phases," Sarah offered, but her tone suggested she was getting tired of my marital complaints. "Some phases last longer than others," I replied, thinking of Julian's hands on my skin just 2 hours earlier. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to be with someone who actually saw me." Michelle raised an eyebrow. "That sounds dangerously close to shopping around, Zuleika." "I'm not shopping. I'm just aware that other options exist." The words felt bold, liberating. These women had known me for years as Nate's wife, Lila's mother, the responsible property manager who always played by the rules. They had no idea about the woman who'd spent her lunch break in Julian's bed, feeling more alive than she had in years. "Options like what?" Sarah leaned forward, intrigued despite herself. "Like men who still know how to make a woman feel desirable, who don't treat marriage like a business partnership." I was about to elaborate when I saw Nate walk through the cafe door. He looked around, spotted our table, and headed over with that careful smile he wore when he was trying to be social. "Ladies," he said, nodding to Sarah and Michelle. "Mind if I join you for a minute? I was in the neighborhood and saw Zuleika's car." The timing couldn't have been worse. My heart pounded as he pulled up a chair, settling between me and Sarah with the easy confidence of a man who belonged there. "We were just talking about marriage," Michelle said, shooting me a meaningful look. "The challenges of keeping things fresh after several years." "Ah," Nate's smile tightened slightly. Always a relevant topic. I felt trapped between my public persona and the conversation I'd been having. Part of me wanted to retreat, play the dutiful wife, but another part, the part that had been awakened by Julian's attention, wanted to push forward. "I was telling them how some couples just grow apart," I said, meeting Nate's eyes. "How they stop seeing each other as romantic partners and start functioning more like roommates. That's unfortunate, Nate replied quietly. Usually fixable, though, if both people are willing to work at it. But what if one person has already checked out emotionally? What if they're just going through the motions? Sarah and Michelle exchanged uncomfortable glances. This was clearly more personal than they'd signed up for. Then maybe that person should have an honest conversation with their spouse instead of complaining to friends, Nate said, his voice still level but with an edge I rarely heard. The public nature of the moment made me reckless. Sometimes honest conversations don't work when the other person is too comfortable with the status quo to change. And sometimes people create problems that don't exist because they're looking for excuses to justify behavior they know is wrong. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah cleared her throat awkwardly. Maybe we should, she started. No, it's fine, I interrupted, feeling my cheeks flush. Nate's right. Some people do look for justifications, like when someone's so emotionally unavailable that their spouse starts to wonder what they're missing. Or when someone starts working late 3 nights a week and comes home smelling like different perfume. The comment hit like a slap. Michelle's eyes widened, and Sarah suddenly found her coffee cup fascinating. I don't know what you're implying, I said, but my voice sounded shaky even to me. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Nate stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. Enjoy your evening, ladies. Zuleika, I'll be at home with our daughter when you're done. Working. He walked away without looking back, leaving me sitting at the table with 2 friends who suddenly seemed like strangers. Zuleika, Sarah said carefully, what was that about? He's paranoid. He thinks because I've been putting more effort into my appearance and working harder, I must be up to something. But even as I said it, I could see the doubt in their eyes. These women had known Nate for years. They'd seen him as the steady, reliable husband who remembered birthdays and helped with school fundraisers. The idea that he was paranoid didn't fit. Maybe you should go home and talk to him, Michelle suggested. That seemed like more than paranoia. I wanted to defend myself, to explain that I deserved to feel desired, that marriage shouldn't mean the death of passion. Instead, I found myself making excuses to leave. 20 minutes later, I sat in my car outside the cafe, hands shaking as I called Julian. He knows, I said when he answered. Or suspects. He basically accused me in front of my friends. What do you want to do? The question was simple, but the answer felt enormous. I could go home, confess, try to repair my marriage, or I could stop pretending and choose the life that made me happy. I want to stop sneaking around, I heard myself say. I'm tired of feeling guilty for wanting more. Then stop feeling guilty. You deserve to be happy, Zuleika. When I finally drove home, the house was quiet. Nate's car was in the driveway, but I could see him through the living room window, sitting alone on the couch with his laptop. The image should have made me feel guilty, but instead, I felt relieved. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Proud of you for standing your ground tonight. A woman has to fight for her happiness. I stared at the message, wondering how she knew about the cafe incident. Then I realized Sarah must have called her. Our social circles overlapped in the way small communities always did. If people were already talking, maybe it was time to stop hiding. I spent the next day planning, not consciously, but in the way someone prepares for a conversation they know is inevitable. I called Julian during my lunch break and asked him to come over that evening. Are you sure? He asked. That seems like a big step. I'm tired of living 2 different lives. If Nate wants honesty, he'll get it. The words felt brave when I said them, but by the time I pulled into our driveway that evening, my hands were shaking. Nate's car was already there, and I could see lights on in the kitchen, where he was probably helping Lila with homework. Inside, the scene was exactly what I'd imagined. Lila sat at the kitchen table with math worksheets spread around her, while Nate stood at the stove, stirring something that smelled like his famous spaghetti sauce. Mommy! Lila jumped up to hug me. Daddy's making dinner. He said we could eat in the living room and watch a movie. That sounds nice, sweetheart. I kissed the top of her head, avoiding Nate's eyes. I thought we could have a family evening, he said quietly. Maybe talk after Lila goes to bed. The reasonable tone, the olive branch, the assumption that our marriage was worth saving, it all felt suffocating. Julian would be here in 2 hours. It was time to stop pretending. Actually, I have plans tonight. Nate's stirring slowed. Plans? A friend is coming over. Someone I want you to meet. The spoon clinked against the pot as he set it down. Zuleika, if this is about last night, this isn't about last night. This is about honesty, which you said you wanted. Lila looked between us, her 7-year-old instincts picking up on the tension. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, baby, I said, forcing a smile. Why don't you go play in your room for a bit? Mommy and Daddy need to talk. After she left, Nate turned to face me fully. What kind of friend? The kind that makes me remember who I am outside of this house. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something that looked like grief. How long? Does it matter? It matters to me. I could have lied, minimized it, tried to spare his feelings. But Julian's words echoed in my head. I deserve to be happy. I deserve to stop feeling guilty for wanting more. 3 months. His name is Julian. Nate nodded slowly, like he was processing information he'd suspected but hoped wasn't true. And you've invited him here? To our home, where our daughter lives. Lila will be in her room. This doesn't have to affect her. Zuleika, everything we do affects her. She's 7 years old, and you're bringing your... He struggled with the word. Your boyfriend into her home. He's not just my boyfriend. He's someone who sees me as more than a housekeeper and babysitter. The accusation was unfair, and we both knew it. Nate had never treated me like hired help. But I was past caring about fairness. The doorbell rang at exactly 7:30. Julian was always punctual. Another thing I found attractive about him. I'll get it, I said, smoothing my hair. Julian stood on our front porch, wearing jeans and a black button-down shirt, holding a bottle of wine, like this was a normal social visit. He looked younger than his 29 years, with the kind of casual confidence that came from not having a mortgage, or a child, or years of marital compromise weighing him down. You look beautiful, he said, kissing my cheek as he stepped inside. Julian, this is my husband, Nate. The two men sized each other up in our foyer. Nate was taller, broader, with the solid build of someone who'd played sports in college. Julian was leaner, more artistic, with tattoos peeking out from under his rolled sleeves. Nate, Julian said, extending his hand with surprising confidence. I've heard a lot about you. Nate shook his hand, but didn't return the pleasantries. I wish I could say the same. We moved to the living room, where the tension was thick enough to cut. I sat next to Julian on the couch, our couch, where Nate and I had watched countless movies and shared quiet conversations about our days. So, Nate said, settling into his armchair, Julian, what do you do? I'm a bartender at Russo's downtown, but I'm also a photographer. That's actually how I met Zuleika. She was handling the lease renewal for the gallery space next door. I remembered that day clearly. Julian had been outside on a smoke break, and we'd started talking about the photographs displayed in the gallery window. He'd listened to my opinions about composition and lighting like they mattered, like I was more than just someone processing paperwork. Photography, Nate repeated. That's interesting. Steady income? The question was pointed, and Julian's jaw tightened slightly. I do fine. I'm sure you do. It's just that supporting a family requires a certain level of financial stability. Mortgages, health insurance, college funds, that sort of thing. Nate, I warned, but he continued. Of course, I suppose that's not your concern, is it? You're just here for the fun parts. Julian leaned forward. Actually, I'm here because I care about Zuleika, because I see how unhappy she's been, and I want to help her find joy again. By breaking up her family? By giving her what you apparently can't. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Nate's face went very still, and I realized we'd crossed a line there was no coming back from. "And what exactly is that?" Nate asked quietly. "Passion, attention, the feeling that she's desired instead of just convenient." I should have intervened, should have tried to de-escalate. Instead, I found myself nodding, validating Julian's assessment of my marriage. Nate looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something break behind his eyes. "I think you should leave," he said to Julian. "Actually," Julian replied, standing up, "I think you should leave. Zuleika's made her choice." The presumption in his voice surprised even me. We'd never discussed me leaving Nate, never made concrete plans, but something about Julian's confidence, his willingness to fight for me, made me feel powerful. "He's right," I heard myself say. "I want you to go, Nate." My husband stared at me for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly and walked upstairs. I heard him moving around our bedroom, opening drawers, and I realized he was actually packing. 20 minutes later, he came back downstairs with a duffel bag and his laptop case. Julian and I were sitting closer together on the couch, and I was leaning into him, claiming my space. "I'll be at my mother's," Nate said. "I'll call tomorrow about seeing Lila." "You can see her any time," I said, feeling generous in my victory. "I'm not trying to keep you from your daughter." He paused at the front door. "Just be careful, Zuleika. Make sure you know what you're trading away before it's too late to get it back." Then he was gone, and Julian was kissing me in the living room where I'd spent 8 years of marriage. I should have felt guilty or sad or worried about Lila's reaction. Instead, I smiled. But 5 minutes later, red and blue lights flashed through our front windows, and someone was knocking on the door with the authoritative rhythm that could only mean police. The 2 officers standing on my porch looked official and serious in a way that made my stomach drop. The older one, a woman with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun, held a manila envelope. "Mrs. Zuleika Farrow?" "Yes, that's me." "I'm Officer Martinez. This is Officer Thompson. We need to serve you with some legal documents." Behind me, Julian stood up from the couch, suddenly looking much younger and less confident than he had moments before. "Legal documents? What kind of legal documents?" Officer Martinez handed me the envelope. "Restraining order, temporary custody arrangement, and financial injunction. You'll need to read through everything carefully. There's also a court date scheduled for next week." My hands shook as I opened the envelope. The papers were thick, official, filled with legal language that made my head spin. But certain phrases jumped out: harassment and emotional distress, temporary sole custody, freezing of joint accounts. "I don't understand," I said, looking up at the officers. "Harassment? I haven't harassed anyone." "According to the filing, there have been incidents of public humiliation, bringing an unauthorized person into the family home, and creating an unsafe environment for a minor child." Julian stepped beside me. "This is ridiculous. Zuleika has every right to have friends over." Officer Thompson's expression didn't change. "Sir, I'm going to need you to leave the premises. The restraining order specifically mentions you by name." "What?" I scanned the papers frantically until I found it. Julian Hayes was prohibited from being within 500 feet of the family residence. "This is insane," I said. "He can't just kick us out of my own house." "Actually, ma'am, according to these documents, Mr. Nathaniel Farrow is the primary mortgage holder and has been granted temporary exclusive use of the residence pending the custody hearing." The words hit me like physical blows. "But I live here. My daughter lives here." "Your daughter is currently with her paternal grandmother, according to the paperwork. You have supervised visitation rights twice a week, pending the court's final decision." I felt the ground shifting under my feet. "Supervised? She's my daughter." "Ma'am, I understand this is difficult, but we're just here to serve the papers and ensure compliance with the court order. You have 48 hours to remove your personal belongings." Julian was already backing toward the door. Zuleika, maybe I should go. This is getting complicated. No, I grabbed his arm. Don't you dare leave me to deal with this alone. But I could see in his eyes that he was already gone. This wasn't what he'd signed up for. He'd wanted the excitement of an affair, not the messy reality of custody battles and legal consequences. I'll call you tomorrow, he said, but we both knew it was a lie. After the police left and Julian disappeared into the night, I sat alone in my living room, which apparently wasn't my living room anymore, staring at the legal documents. My phone rang. Carmen. Honey, I just heard from Marcia. What's going on? Nate's trying to take Lila away from me. He's claiming I'm an unfit mother because I had a friend over. That's vindictive and cruel. You should call a lawyer immediately. But even as my mother offered support, I could hear uncertainty in her voice. The situation had escalated beyond her ability to simply encourage my happiness. I tried calling Nate, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I tried calling his mother's house, but Marcia hung up as soon as she heard my voice. When I called Sarah, hoping for support from my friend, she was cold and distant. Zuleika, I think you need to figure out what's really important to you. Lila needs stability right now. I can give her stability. I'm her mother. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been more focused on your own needs than hers. The accusation stung because it held a grain of truth I wasn't ready to acknowledge. That night, I slept alone in the bed I'd shared with Nate for 8 years, surrounded by the silence of a house that no longer felt like home. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow seemed threatening. I'd never realized how much safety I'd felt with Nate's presence, even when I'd been taking it for granted. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to a lawyer's office downtown. Margaret Chen was a divorce attorney Sarah had recommended months ago when I'd first started complaining about my marriage, back when it had all seemed theoretical. Mrs. Farrow, she said, reviewing the documents I'd brought, this is quite comprehensive. Your husband's attorney has built a strong case. Based on what? I haven't done anything illegal. No, but you've created a pattern of behavior that could be interpreted as putting your own desires above your child's welfare. The affair, bringing your boyfriend into the family home, the public confrontations, it all paints a picture of instability. I felt like I was drowning. So what are my options? We can fight it, but I have to be honest, the evidence is compelling. Phone records, witness statements, even social media posts where you've complained about your marriage. Your husband's attorney has been very thorough. Social media posts. She showed me printouts of Facebook comments I'd made over the past few months. Complaints about Nate, jokes about trading up, responses to friends' posts about unhappy marriages. Taken together, they painted a picture of someone who'd been planning to leave her family long before the affair started. The good news is that courts generally favor shared custody arrangements, but given the current circumstances, you'll likely be looking at supervised visitation until you can demonstrate stability. What does that mean? End the relationship with Mr. Hayes, complete a parenting class, possibly undergo counseling to address the underlying issues that led to the situation. I stared at the papers spread across her desk, seeing my life reduced to legal strategies and court orders. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. I was supposed to be the heroine of my own story, the woman who chose happiness over settling. Instead, I was sitting in a lawyer's office, being told I might lose my daughter. How did he do this so fast? I asked. Restraining orders can be granted quickly if there's evidence of harassment or potential harm. Your husband's attorney filed an emergency motion based on the incident with Mr. Hayes and your daughter's presence in the home. I thought about Lila, probably confused and scared, wondering why Mommy and Daddy weren't living in the same house anymore. The guilt I'd been avoiding for months crashed over me like a wave. I want to see my daughter. That can be arranged through the supervised visitation schedule. But Mrs. Farrow, I need you to understand something. The next few weeks will determine the rest of your relationship with your child. Every decision you make will be scrutinized. Every action will be evaluated by the court. As I drove home, to the house I apparently had 48 hours to leave, I tried calling Julian. His phone went straight to voicemail. When I drove by Rousseau's that evening, his manager told me he'd called in sick. The man who'd promised to help me find happiness had vanished the moment happiness became complicated. I spent that night packing my belongings, each item a reminder of the life I'd built and then systematically destroyed. In Lila's room, I found drawings she'd made of our family, stick figures of Mommy, Daddy, and herself, all holding hands under a smiling sun. At the bottom of the pile was a newer drawing, darker and more chaotic. The three figures were separated, with what looked like storm clouds overhead. She'd known. Even at 7 years old, she'd sensed that her world was falling apart. I sat on her bed, holding the drawing, and finally let myself cry for what I'd lost. The supervised visitation center was a cheerful place, designed to mask its depressing purpose. Bright colors, children's books, toys scattered around, all meant to create a normal environment for fractured families, to pretend everything was okay for a few hours. I'd been living in an extended stay hotel for 2 weeks, spending my days at work and my evenings with a court-appointed therapist who asked uncomfortable questions about my choices. Julian had stopped returning my calls entirely. When I'd finally confronted him at Rousseau's, he'd been embarrassed, apologetic, but ultimately clear. "This isn't what I wanted, Zuleika. I thought we were just having fun." "Fun?" The word had come out strangled. "I left my husband for you." "I never asked you to do that." The truth of it had hit me like a slap. He was right. He'd never promised me anything beyond the excitement of an affair. I'd built a fantasy around his attention, projected a future he'd never offered. Now, sitting in the visitation center, I watched Lila color at a small table, her movements careful and subdued. She'd hugged me when I arrived, but there was a wariness in her eyes that broke my heart. "How's school, sweetheart?" "Okay. Mrs. Peterson says I'm doing good in math." "That's wonderful. Daddy's been helping you with homework?" She nodded, not looking up from her coloring. "And Grandma Marcia makes really good cookies." The casual mention of Nate's mother stung. Marcia had been like a second mother to me for 8 years, but she'd cut off all contact since the separation. I'd lost more than just my husband. I'd lost his entire family, people who'd loved and supported me until I'd given them reason not to. "Lila, do you have any questions about why Mommy and Daddy aren't living together right now?" She finally looked up, her dark eyes serious. "Are you getting divorced like Emma's parents?" The question was direct in the way only children could manage. "We're figuring things out, baby." "Emma's mom says her dad found someone who makes him happier. Did Daddy find someone who makes him happier?" The irony wasn't lost on me. "No, sweetheart, Daddy didn't find someone else." "Did you?" 7 years old, and she could see right through me. I thought about lying, but the therapist had emphasized the importance of age-appropriate honesty. "Mommy made some mistakes. I thought I wanted something different, but I was wrong. Do you want to come home?" The simple question contained everything I'd lost. Home. Not just the house, but the life we'd built together. The morning routine of making breakfast, while Nate got ready for work. The evening ritual of homework and dinner and bedtime stories. The quiet conversations after Lila was asleep, planning weekend activities or discussing our days. I'd thrown it all away for the illusion of passion, for the temporary high of feeling desired by someone new. "I want what's best for you, Lila. That's all Mommy has ever wanted." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. If I'd wanted what was best for her, I wouldn't have brought Julian into our home. I wouldn't have prioritized my own desires over her stability. After the visit, I drove to the law office for a meeting with Margaret Chen. She had news, and her expression told me it wasn't good. "The court has made its preliminary ruling," she said, sliding papers across her desk. "Your husband has been granted primary custody, with you receiving supervised visitation twice a week until you complete the required programs. The words blurred on the page as I tried to process them. How long? Minimum 6 months, possibly longer, depending on your progress and any other factors that might arise. Other factors? Your husband's attorney has indicated they're considering a move. His company has offered him a position in Denver. Better salary, closer to his extended family. Denver, 1,500 miles away from Lila. He can't do that, can he? If he has primary custody and can demonstrate that the move is in the child's best interest, yes. The court generally allows custodial parents to relocate for legitimate reasons. I stared at the papers, seeing my daughter's future mapped out in legal language. A new school, new friends, a new life that didn't include me in any meaningful way. There is one option, Margaret continued. Your husband's attorney reached out yesterday. They're willing to discuss a more generous custody arrangement if you're open to mediation. What kind of arrangement? Shared custody, no supervision required, and a guarantee that any relocation would include provisions for your continued involvement in Lila's life. What's the catch? You'd need to sign an agreement acknowledging responsibility for the breakdown of the marriage and waiving any claim to spousal support or significant asset division. In other words, admit I'd destroyed my family and walk away with nothing but the promise of seeing my daughter. I need to think about it. But even as I said it, I knew there was nothing to think about. I'd gambled everything on a fantasy and lost. Now I was being offered a chance to salvage something from the wreckage. That evening, I sat in my hotel room, staring at my phone. I'd drafted a dozen text messages to Nate, deleted them all. What was there to say? That I was sorry, that I'd made a terrible mistake, that I'd trade anything to go back to the boring, stable marriage I'd been so desperate to escape. Finally, I called his mother's house. Marcia answered on the third ring. Marcia, it's Zuleika. Please don't hang up. Silence. I know you hate me. I know I don't deserve to ask for anything, but I need to talk to Nate. About Lila. He's not here, she said finally. He's at the house, packing. Packing? For Denver. He got the job offer yesterday. They want him to start in 3 weeks. My heart stopped. He's really leaving? What did you expect, Zuleika? You destroyed his life here. Everyone knows what happened. He can't go to the grocery store without people whispering. His daughter asks why Mommy doesn't live with them anymore. Why would he stay? The pain in her voice was raw, honest. I'd hurt more than just Nate. I'd damaged an entire network of relationships, created ripples of pain that touched everyone who'd cared about our family. I need to see him, to apologize, to try to fix this. Some things can't be fixed, Marcia said quietly, but maybe you can keep them from getting worse. An hour later, I stood on the porch of the house that used to be mine, watching Nate load boxes into his car through the window. He looked thinner, older, worn down by weeks of legal battles and single parenting and the public humiliation of a failed marriage. When he answered the door, his expression was carefully neutral. Zuleika, can I come in, please? He stepped aside, and I walked into the living room where everything had fallen apart. The space looked different now, cleaner, emptier, like he was already erasing traces of our life together. Marcia told me about Denver. It's a good opportunity, better for Lila long term. And further away from me. He didn't deny it. You'll still see her. The custody agreement includes provisions for summer visits, holidays. A few weeks a year instead of every day. That's what you chose when you decided our marriage wasn't worth fighting for. The words were quiet, matter of fact, which somehow made them hurt worse than anger would have. I was wrong, I said, about everything. Julian, the affair, thinking I needed something different. I was wrong. Nate sat down heavily on the couch. I know you were. Then why can't we fix this? Why can't we try again? He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw years of love and frustration and disappointment in his eyes. Because you didn't just make a mistake, Zuleika. You made a choice. Every day for 3 months you chose to lie to me. You chose to meet him instead of coming home to your family. You chose to bring him into our house, in front of our daughter. Those weren't accidents or moments of weakness. They were decisions. People make bad decisions. That doesn't mean they can't change. You're right. But trust, once it's broken... He shook his head. I can't live wondering who you're texting, why you're working late, whether you're telling me the truth. I won't put Lila through the instability of parents who can't trust each other. I wanted to argue, to promise I'd changed, to beg for another chance. But looking at him, I realized the man I'd fallen in love with 8 years ago was still there. He was just protecting himself and our daughter from me. I signed the mediation agreement, I said finally. Margaret filed it this morning. Something that might have been relief flickered across his face. Thank you. I want you to know that I loved you. I still love you. I just forgot how to appreciate what I had. I know, he said softly. I loved you too. That's why this hurts so much. 3 weeks later, I stood in the airport, watching Nate and Lila walk toward their gate. She turned back to wave at me, her small face pressed against the glass barrier that separated ticketed passengers from the rest of the world. I waved back, smiling so she wouldn't see me cry, and watched my daughter disappear into her new life. 6 months later, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of Lila on a swing set, laughing, with mountains visible in the background. The message read, "She's doing well, thought you'd want to see." I stared at the photo for a long time, seeing how happy she looked, how healthy and secure. Nate was giving her what I couldn't: stability, consistency, a home where she didn't have to worry about her parents' drama. I texted back, "Thank you, she looks beautiful." A few minutes later, another message. "She asks about you. I tell her Mommy loves her very much." It was more grace than I deserved, more kindness than I'd shown him. But that was who Nate was. The steady, reliable man I'd thrown away because I'd confused excitement with love, passion with happiness. I kept the photo on my phone, a reminder of what I'd lost and why I'd lost it. Some mistakes can be forgiven, but their consequences last forever. I learned to live with mine. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.